Good evening and welcome to the rest of the news. Our special guest today is Matt Singleton. And Matt, tell us a little about yourself.
I am a minister from Louisville, Kentucky. I've been doing a internet ministry for the past few years called BibleSmack.net, and just been studying a lot of things. I've been going through things on theology, history, politics, and philosophy, and just want to contribute, what I can to the world in conversation.
We wanted to talk a little bit about these two DVDs, and they're both on evolution. And tell us, why do you think evolution is important?
I think evolution is the way our world thinks. Basically, when you go into the universities, Darwin and the ideas of evolution took over in the 1800s, and every single aspect is affected by that philosophy, from not only the way we look at science to even the way we look at ethics and the way we look at religion.
One of the parts of this DVD, which are free, by the way, we'd like to send you these two DVDs for free today if you call 893-2444. And actually, we have a total of 27 DVDs, and we'll send you the list, and you can pick out which ones you like. And they are documentaries. They're fantastic DVDs. They're all documentaries about different aspects of the cultural war, and how, I opened the door to say cultural war. What that means is there's some people that are trying to, they believe in God and they're trying to promote the things of God, and there are other people that are trying to get rid of God. Take prayer out of school, take the Ten Commandments out of the school, take the Bible out of the school, take creation science out of the school, and just get rid of God. They think that's the way to go.
I think the big trick of it all is that there are a minority of people who stand out and they say, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God. But the philosophy of atheism has been allowed to take over people's minds and hearts.
And the schools.
Yeah, and the churches.
With our money.
Yeah. And the thing is, with all these different things, and you talk about, when it comes to our money, let me tell you something. When I was about 12 years old, I was going to middle school, and they taught us about this idea, a link between humans and apes, called Piltdown Man. Okay? Now, Piltdown Man was this half-human, half-ape-looking thing, and they showed this skull, and it was very convincing. But in 1950, they found the actual skull, and they looked at it for a minute, and when they looked under it, they found copper wire connecting the jaw to the skull. And then when they took DNA samples, they found out the jaw was that of an orangutan, and the skull was that of a human.
Oh, no, and somebody had wired them together.
But here's the question. I was 12 in 1991, 40 years later. Why was our school system
still
with taxpayer money teaching something that was openly a fraud?
There's another one very similar. I think a lot of people know it. Somebody found a pig's tooth, and they said, "Oh, this is the missing link between apes and people." So they started constructing a head and a body, and they had tents, and they had children and women, mothers and children, and they had this huge display. I think they called him
Nebraska Man. Yes.
Okay, and they said, this is the missing link.
Yeah.
And then somebody finally looked at the tooth and said, well, that's a pig's tooth. Oh, he says, so then the whole thing blew up in smoke. Well, and that's the way they've been doing this for years.
There's a fundamental problem with our logic these days, and we all go by this logic. I call it modernism. And what happens is that what happens is everybody goes about what's popular in the day, okay, and that's political truth. And how does politics runs? Money, okay?
Ah.
The money orders the politics, and the politics, they hire scientists.
Yeah.
Now, science is observation of the present, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a term we call history, and that's observation of the past.
Yeah.
Well, instead of going to history, we go to science for history.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
And that is in philosophy, there is a logical fallacy called the inductive fallacy, where you cannot determine what's outside of your environment just because you know what's inside your environment. And so basically, they start to make up and fantasize about the past.
Exactly. This DVD is one fantastic DVD. It has 4 proofs, scientific proofs, 4 scientific proofs that evolution could never have happened. Okay? And science has disproven the theory of evolution. It's totally been disproven by science. And the 4 reasons why evolution could never have happened is, number 1, it depends on the Big Bang. And the Big Bang is the idea that in the beginning there was nothing and then it exploded.
Not only was there nothing, but everything exploded out of the nothing. And,
Yeah.
you know, and there's a lot of questions, like, for instance, okay, if you have a star, which the sun's 1,000,000 times the size of our whole planet Earth, okay, if you have a star and you have every star, and there's an endless amount of stars, okay, that are that big and bigger, and they're all burning fusion, okay, super powerful fusion,
Yeah.
none of them, they always say, okay, well, it was 10 billion, there was 15 billion, there was 18 billion, and there's even some scientists now who are trying to go to 75 billion, okay, and
We call
all the
those
stuff.
pseudosciences.
Yeah, and all they say this, and they say, well, when are these things going to burn out? You know, if they're lasting that long, we never asked how does the universe sustain itself for that long. We always ask, because what we're doing is that we're not looking at history. We're just saying, here's what I can do with time in the past. I can just make it up, and maybe it'll fit here, maybe it'll fit there. But how did it really work? How did
Right.
the universe really survive?
So the question to ask your science teacher is, what was it that exploded during the Big Bang? And where did that come from?
Because the Big Bang, okay, it's based off a philosophy called naturalism, which means there is no God, there is
Yeah.
no miracle. So as soon as you're adding miracles, then you've broken the whole theory, because the theory is always based off of this, that everything is exactly the same and it all happened naturally. So if it happened naturally, how can a miracle happen with the Big Bang? And the miracle did happen with the Big Bang. Did you know it's not even just the stars, but it's space and even time? Times, the whole process of time started with the Big Bang and gravity, and you get Einstein's theory of relativity in there. And with all that, how did all that come to be? And they'll say, well, I believe in this, and I don't believe in God because of logic. And I ask, but where did logic come from? Where did science come from?
Okay, now let me go to the next proof that evolution is impossible. The theory of evolution is based on the idea that in the beginning there was a primeval soup or ooze or something, and just by chance alone, certain molecules came together and formed a cell or something living. Okay, and the important thing to remember is, there's something called pasteurized milk. It's named after Louis Pasteur. And over 100 years ago, Louis Pasteur did an experiment that proved that nothing living ever comes from non-living material. Okay? And that's a scientific proof, but yet the theory of evolution depends on something living come from something non-living. It's totally impossible. Scientific proof that evolution has been proven wrong by science itself.
Evolutionary scientists are so embarrassed about this issue. It used to be called chemical evolution, and now they're redefining evolution to not even mention it. Because when you look down the basic, and Darwin taught this, like the basic element of life was called the cell.
Yeah.
Well, a cell has to be very simple in order for evolution to be a true theory. Well, guess what? How many parts are there in a cell?
1 million. 1 trillion.
1 trillion. Okay, that means you have
Little
to,
machines in
yeah,
there.
and what they find, I mean, these microscopic cameras, you wouldn't believe it. I've seen it to where they show little protons, or not protons, excuse me, but proteins actually walking, and that means that they're molecules with atoms that are walking. You can't even
Moving around
explain
in
that
there.
kind of stuff.
Okay, now the third scientific proof that evolution has been proven wrong by science is that what we call the fossil record. Okay? Darwin based his theory of evolution on the fossil record. He says, well, these little forms developed into more complicated forms, and the origin of species gradually developed through natural selection and mutation. Okay, and then he says when scientists get into the fossil record and find more fossils, you'll see intermediate forms, how one species evolved into another. And he said in his own book that if there were no intermediate forms, his whole theory would have to be discarded.
And it's so hilarious. I looked at this, and not only did he say that, but 50 years later, they admitted we haven't found any. 100 years later, they admit we haven't found any. And even the most outgoing evangelist of Darwinism, Richard Dawkins, admitted that he's not arguing about the fossil record anymore. Because when you look at the fossils, you don't see any of these half-formed animals. For instance, they'll talk about the whale, and they'll say, well, the whale's a product of evolution because we see this one animal, and, you know, it's got hind legs. But the whales, they have on their tail, they have like these two little bones that are probably about that big. Okay, and I guess the whale's supposed to walk on those two bones. But in reality, those two bones are hips so that the whale can reproduce.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
It has absolutely nothing to do with walking a multi-ton animal around. This is not going to walk a multi-ton animal around.
The thing is, evolution has been disproven by science for several reasons. The Big Bang Theory, what is it that exploded? Number two, life never came from non-life. It never has, never will. The third thing is the fossil record, the Cambrian explosion, proves that Darwin was totally wrong. And the fourth one, if you wanted to include it, was the dinosaurs. There are no intermediate forms to the dinosaurs. So we need to have our children ask their science teachers these four questions. What exploded with the Big Bang, and where did that come from? How come they postulate that life came from non-life when it's never happened? The third thing, what about the fossil record with no intermediate forms? And the fourth thing, where did the dinosaurs come from? So those are four questions that totally destroys the theory of evolution.
Now, here's the thing, though, okay? They figured out one thing, though, to beat you, okay, Dr. Simon, and that is this, that they win as long as they can shut us up.
Right.
They want to keep
They
this
don't want your
information
children
out.
asking the science teacher anything because
No.
it's very embarrassing for the science teacher and he doesn't know what to say.
And there are so many cases of Christians who, if they get to become professors, they have to always keep their opinions to themselves.
Oh, yeah, they'll fire them if they know.
Or they are discredited, and there's
Discrimination.
And there is a lot of oppression of anybody who
Oh,
challenges.
yeah. That's this DVD, The 4 Questions to Ask in Evolution. This is one DVD that you got to see. And the other one is this one, and it shows the connection between Hitler and Darwin. Hitler was a disciple of Darwin, and he basically was saying that he's hurrying up evolution to get rid of races that he didn't like and people he didn't like and this and that, and he based it all on Darwin. Now, Matt, the important thing that I want you to talk about now is what difference does it make?
You know,
Whether you
The
believe in
idea-
evolution or don't believe in evolution.
the idea of evolution is that there is absolutely no purpose or no point to anything at all in the world.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, the idea of the Bible.
Yeah.
Is that there is a purpose and there is a point and there is a truth to everything. There is a philosopher that kind of did the go-between between Charles Darwin and Adolf Hitler, and that guy was a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche. And he came up in his modernist religion. In his modern religion, he realized that there's two wills. He said there is a will to truth and a will to power. And what he meant was that he believed that there's only one life and there's nothing else. And we Christians, we believe that there is a heaven and a hell. So what he said was, it's survival of the fittest. It's all about this life. So you have to worry about power. Don't worry about truth. The person who worries about truth is evil.
Right,
Okay?
right.
They think the people who worry about truth is evil because the person who's worried about truth is worried about judgment and something after this life. He said, no, no, no.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah, what you have to worry about is living the life. That life is a fight and you have to destroy everything to find power, because that's all you're going to get out of this life. So stop worrying about morality.
Let me add to what you said. This DVD, this is the second one. It tells a story about children that are getting into all kinds of trouble because they've been raised in a school that tells them nothing's right and wrong, that we just evolved from animals, we are animals, there's no purpose to life, there's no reason for what happens, and there's no big picture. It's just, have a good time. And don't worry about God or eternity or what's right and wrong. No absolutes, okay? This is what are taught with our tax money in our schools, and our children are out there on dope, getting sexually active and having sexually transmitted diseases, having children. The children don't have two parents and they're in prison because they don't have a good home. And all of these problems that we're having because we've told our children, oh, there's nothing right and wrong. Forget about God. Forget about the Ten Commandments. Forget about the Bible. Forget about science, true science, creation science. Forget about all that. Just have a good time.
And this is something I've been dealing with this idea on my website about biblical historical science. You research the past and you research the history of this, and what we have is that our system was held by a guy named John Dewey. John Dewey was an atheist and evolutionist, and he started the official religion called humanism. They always like to not think they're a religion. Officially, humanism is a religion. Well, John Dewey said, you know what? We can figure out our morals through science, and everything will be okay. All right? Well, the thing is once you start getting rid of the Christians, okay, and even if you just start getting the Christians to start acting like heathens, okay, if we just get the Christians start acting like heathens, then what happens? Well, everything turned from John Dewey back to that fellow I was talking about, Nietzsche, doesn't it? Everything's about, if there is no morals, okay, if there's no right and wrong, then why am I worried about truth? I can just lie my way through life. And so the kids are picking up on is what's happened.
Well, since they got God out of the public schools, divorce has gone up, crime has gone up. I've said this 100 times. There was a time when we could leave our car in front of our house, not lock it, and no one would steal your car, but those days are gone. You could leave your house, not lock your house. This is the way it always was. Of course, you're a lot younger than I am, but that's the way it used to be. And you could do all these things, and you could walk through the inner city at night. No one would hit you on the head and steal everything you got. But now, since they've kicked God out of our public school, you better not walk down the street in the inner city at night.
Well, if people got back to reading the Bible, they would hear in Genesis about how we lost our holy nature and we became what we call sinful. Okay, that means that we're evil in the eyes of God.
Yeah.
Now, this is a fact, and since we've ignored that fact, here's what happens. All these systems of thought assume that humans are good. So if they're good, you don't have to make them good. Okay?
right.
So then we assume that everybody left to their
Everybody's
own.
getting better and better.
Yeah, everybody's getting better, that there's no moral
We don't
accountability.
need the jails anymore. We don't need anything like that.
So then what happens is people become irresponsible because nobody's being held accountability. The kids aren't getting spanked no more, right?
Right.
So basically with all that gone, all right, everybody says, hey, I'm God in my own eyes. I can do whatever I want to do.
Right,
It's all
right.
about me because I can just make up the truth, okay? I don't have to worry about the truth anymore. And we have a society that just pushes that. The modern mind is don't learn from history, look into the future, which doesn't tell you anything because nobody can predict the future. All right? And then what do you got to go on because you don't have reason anymore? Well, you have your emotions and your feelings, and then we have chaos and sin and destruction, and that's where we're at.
That's one thing that this does. It predicts the future.
It does predict the future because...
And it has, and it can be proven that what was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago has come true.
Yeah, God knows everything. And here's another concept to think about, because a lot of people miss this, okay? The atheist will say, well, let's argue your concept of God with, I don't believe in the concept of God. All right, God's not just a concept, it's a historical fact.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
This book is historical. The reason why when we read the genealogies we get bored is not because it was a myth to entertain people.
Yeah.
Okay? It was history. That's why they have specific days and times when these people lived and then they died and when they had their kids. It's fact after fact after fact after fact. God is a historical character. He interacts with historical people.
And the archaeologists have confirmed.
Yeah, some of the earliest evolutionists, okay, before Darwin, all right, but the earliest evolutionists started working on this subject called biblical criticism. They said religion evolved, therefore the Bible is in this state of evolution.
Right.
Okay, well, they didn't find any intermediate Bibles either, okay, they didn't find none of that, but they said it was there, and they said the Bible's full of lies. And they said, and one idea was, hey, the Hittite Empire, oh, that was a fairy tale.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, guess what archaeologists found? They found the
Hittite.
Hittite Empire, okay? And discovery after discovery after discovery. When you look at the word Moses, okay, is Moses a Jewish name? No, it is Egyptian, okay? Moses was in Egypt because he has an Egyptian's name, okay? Like you had Tutmos, you have Moses, okay? The
Yeah.
waters, that's an Egyptian name. So all this stuff is historical, it's historically accurate. Meanwhile, you have mythology and the pre-Socratic philosophers, okay? I know this is kind of a thick one, but the first philosophers realized that their history was myth. Okay, but all you have in the past is you have the pagan story and you have the Christian story. Okay, you have the story of the Bible. So if theirs is myth, then ours is history. Meanwhile, evolution makes up the past. So that's fantasy. This is fantasy. This is the only true history that we have.
Focus on the Family put out a series of DVDs maybe 5 or 10 years ago called The Truth Project.
Yes.
And Del Tackett was the speaker. And I remember they went into, some history and the theory of evolution. And he said that, as a lot of people know, our universities, especially Harvard, used to be Christian teaching institutions. And then when Darwin put out his theory of evolution, these professors swallowed it hook, line, and sinker and said, oh, well, truth is evolving, like you were saying, and religion is evolving, law is evolving, people are evolving, everything is evolving, so let's get rid of the Christian teachers and just put evolution and teach how everything is evolving. The Constitution is evolving, truth is evolving, liberty is evolving, and everything is evolving, and we don't need God anymore, and we're so smart that we don't need God. And
It's that little leaven that leaveneth the whole lump. And it started in the seminaries. These ideas were all brought out. You know, Darwin studied theology. He didn't have a doctorate or a degree in science at all.
Yeah.
You know, he was somebody who said, okay, I'm going to put my thoughts together. I'm going to go with this. He ripped off his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin. He ripped off a friend of his, Alfred Russel Huxley. He took their ideas, added one or two ideas about finches, and then just went to town
Yeah.
on it. Everybody loved it because they were tired of the Bible, because they did not have, they had revival out in the streets. They had revival out in the farms, out in the homes and the families, but they didn't have revival in these high and mighty ivory towers.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they said, let's get rid of the Bible. Let's go back to me, myself, and my morality, and I'll get whatever I want.
They asked one of these leading evolutionists, well, now, why, all the scientific evidence is in favor of creation science. Why don't you believe it? And he hummed and hawed, and he says, well, it might interfere with my sex life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's the
sexual
scientific
mores.
proof.
Yeah.
The scientific proof of evolution is, well, it's going to...
And now let's bring this back, okay? Because what happens when nobody's responsible? Everybody falls apart, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what happens, okay? They have to depend on somebody if their families are destroyed, okay? And this is where Karl Marx comes in, okay? He's one of the three prophets, okay? I always say, like, you got Freud, you had Darwin. Darwin kind of started the whole thing, but you had Darwin, Freud, and you had Karl Marx. And, they said, look, the government, the nanny state will take care of you when you live a horrible life.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
it all the things that we kind of worry about today, it's all going back to this, I'm going to be God in my own heart. And that little piece of leaven has grown and grown. It's leavened the whole lump.
The whole idea, I think, of socialism and get rid of God and let the government become God. So if you have a problem, rather than going to God, you go to the government and say, oh, I've got this problem, I've got that problem. And the government is going to take care of all your problems instead of the creator of the universe. And it's just, like you said, it changes the whole way of thinking. And it becomes a religion. If you believe in evolution today, you've got to take it by faith. It's blind faith is the only way you can believe in evolution today.
And instead of going to the church, instead of going to the Bible, when your heart is hurt, when you're feeling depressed, take drugs.
Exactly. So I tell you, we've got a lot of problems, and a lot of it is coming from the fact that we've rejected the love of God. Jesus came to love, heal, and forgive us, and we said, "Oh no, I don't need Jesus. I'm good enough on my own, and I don't need forgiveness for anything. I'm just going to go to the government and get a check or something."
I'm just going to mention one real quick fact, and that is that the ideas of evolution, as I said, they didn't start with Darwin. They've been a part of the pagan philosophy the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we didn't come up with science. We came up with idols.
These two DVDs, this is the two DVDs on evolution, and they're free. We'd love to send them to you because, people are hurting today. Yeah. They're on dope. They're going for everywhere to try to find some relief, and we'd like to send them. Call this number, 893-2444, and just tell them you want the two DVDs on evolution. Well, Matt, we're running out of time. We sure appreciate you being here.
God bless you.
God bless you, and we hope you'll tune in again next week for the rest of the news.